Thank you so much for speaking to us at the London Defence Conference and for our new app. You just said then that the highest priority for the Prime Minister and for yourself is finalising this defence investment plan. We've been speaking to members of the defence industry that are worried about jobs, military personnel who say there's paralysis. Can you give assurance to everyone in defence that this vital piece of work will at least be published before MPs go home for the summer break?
Well, first of all, great to see you here. Great to have Sky involved in the London Defence Conference. I've just come out of the lift and run into the Prime Minister of Kosovo. So your backing, your involvement is a great reinforcement of what is a conference that's going from strength to strength. On the Defence Investment Plan, we're working flat out. We're close to finalising it. You heard the Prime Minister last week saying he's personally giving it his full attention. I know it's a high priority for him, just like it is for me. And this is a 10-year plan. It's important we get it right, but most importantly, it's not stopping us making some of the investment decisions we need, letting the contracts we need. And we've let over 1,200 major contracts in the last year plus. Big investments that are about rebuilding our armed forces for the future, about transforming them for the future, but also reinforcing the ability for defence to drive economic growth in this country.
But you've not answered the question. So will it come in? Is it a matter of weeks, months? Might it even stretch out into next year until we see this work?
Well, as Prime Minister said, we're working flat out on this. We'll publish it as soon as possible.
So days, weeks, months.
But the most important thing for our forces and for industry and our innovators and investors, many of whom I'm meeting today alongside the London Defence Conference, is it's not stopping us making the big decisions necessary, whether those are announcements like today with Cambridge Aerospace, a great new British company that will help us produce rapidly interceptors for the Middle East and for our own forces, or the much bigger contracts like the £1 billion into new military helicopters in Yeovil.
And you said that the public needs to understand the reason for greater investment in defence and that this money will have to come at the expense of other areas. Can you spell out, be open with the public what that means? If we're increasing defence spending, it means there's going to have to be cuts in other parts of other budgets.
Well, first of all, this is a government now that's made the biggest investment and increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We've spelt out so far how we will fund that. So next year we hit 2.6% of GDP. We haven't hit that level in this country since Labour was last in government in 2010. And that money for next year will come from a switch out of overseas development aid. In that case, part of the funding, difficult decisions that the government's prepared to make because, as Keir Starmer has said, defence is our first duty, and the public recognise, I think, that we're in an era of new threats. It requires that fresh investment in defence, and I want to make sure that that is about reinforcing and transforming our armed forces, but also growing our economy and creating new jobs right across the UK as well.
We're reporting today that obviously a big push by you was to transform and reform the way that the Ministry of Defence rearms and fights. But it's been described to me by insiders as a bit of a fiasco, with too much focus on structure and changes to structure and not enough on war-fighting capability. How do you respond to that?
Well, I remember being in opposition and hearing you argue how fundamentally defence needed to be reformed, and I set out speeches and plans for that before the last election. Of course you've got to deal with structure. Of course you'll get some of that sort of reaction if you're changing things deeply, but I would say to you, first and foremost, we need clear accountabilities. People need to be clear what they're responsible for. We've now got a National Armaments Director for the first time. We've got new leadership right across defence. We've got a Chief of the Defence Staff for the first time now capable and responsible for commanding the service chiefs. And for the first time, instead of 11 different areas where we're making defence investment decisions, we've got one single investment budget. It allows us to do things in a more integrated way. It allows us to do things more quickly, and I think you've seen that in the way that we've set up Task Force Sabre in the middle of this Middle Eastern conflict, and about the rapid ability to let contracts and get new kit and new technologies in the hands of our frontline forces.
I know our time is short, but can I just ask that it's being reported that the US and Donald Trump is going to be auditing the support that the UK and other countries gave to him in his war against Iran, and that there will be retribution. Are you bracing yourself for some kind of retribution from the United States for not giving more wholesome support to his war?
No, I'm not, for two reasons. One, this is rightly consistent with what President Trump and the US have been saying, which is they want to see each and every NATO member stepping up and doing more in NATO, on Ukraine, on defence spending. We know that's the case. But secondly, our actions in support of our forces, our allies, and in some of the operations, the US strikes on Iranian missile sites have been an important part of seeing this conflict reach this point. But importantly now, we want to see the ceasefire that is fledgling reinforced, become a stable long-term peace, because that's in the end the way that will restore the stability to that region. So
you're not worried about the US withdrawing its forces from the UK, from bases here and in Diego Garcia? And actually,
no, I mean, on the Middle East, I will say to anyone, it was weeks before this current conflict broke out that we reinforced UK defences in the region. We've got over 1,000 UK personnel protecting British interests, protecting bases, but also British allies in the wider region. So we played our part in defending our interests and our allies. We've made our decisions in our national interest, and where that's been important, we've also supported some of the US operations in the way that the US has asked us to.
And would you say, actually, for the United States, it's more of an advantage for them to have forces and air bases in the UK and in Diego Garcia than it would be if they were to be withdrawn in punishment?
I would always argue for the principle of our alliances, the principle that NATO is founded on, that no nation, however strong, can't be strengthened if it works alongside allies and in cooperation.
And one final question, if I'm allowed, thank you. Is the US the UK's number one ally?
Is the US the UK's number one ally? It's certainly the case that our relationship on military and security matters is still deeper than any other ally.
Is it the number one ally, though?
Well, it's still the case that we do things with the US that no other nations do. And, I would say to President Trump, some of his forces have our forces fighting alongside them, defending bases in northern Iraq, where our forces, and I'm proud of the way that they've helped defend those skies, defend those personnel, defend those bases and the British interests.
So will you say that the US is the UK's number one military ally?
I would say the US is absolutely our most important military and security ally. I would say it's our most important ally within the NATO alliance as a whole. But as we look at the future of that alliance, as we're discussing at this London Defence Conference here, and you do on Sky, we've got to step up the European leadership of that, and the UK will play a leading role in doing so.
And can I just check what you mean when you say the UK is helping the US in the war, in terms of defending, like in Iraq? Are there actually UK personnel who are embedded with the US military that are actually striking Iran, or have you forbidden them from doing that?
I'm not going to go into those sort of operational details. I was describing the confirmation of the permissions that we've granted for basing for US operations where they are defensive, where they are about taking out the Iranian capabilities, particularly their missile sites and sources and supplies, which are holding and menacing our interests, but also those of our allies throughout the Middle East.